Miami Condo Mondays is a live podcast on the first workday of the week at 4 p.m. South Florida time. The program features former journalist and current Wall Street consultant Peter Zaleski of the Miami Condo Investing Club and former lender and veteran condo broker Jenny Huertas of CVRLP.com. Recorded weekly in greater downtown Miami, this one-hour discussion will provide a refreshing and sometimes controversial perspective on the state of the South Florida condo market from a pair of seasoned real estate professionals who do not always agree. The program won't tell you what to think about the South Florida condo market, but will give you something to think about before buying, selling, taking listings, or financing units. This podcast is not authorized by the Miami real estate industry and will quite possibly annoy many of its figureheads. Welcome to this week's episode of Miami Condo Mondays, broadcast live on the social media accounts of Peter Zaleski and Jenny Huertas.
Happy Monday. I'm Peter Zaleski. I am a condo consultant. I'm also the founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. If you're tuning into this podcast, you are here for Miami Condo Mondays. Every Monday at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, we do a 1-hour conversation. We deal with a different topic. We give you straight talk from two veteran South Florida real estate experts. I'm Peter Zaleski, as mentioned. That's my partner, Jenny Huertas. Jenny is a broker owner of a company called CVR Realty. You can find her at cvrrealty.com. What are we going to be talking about this week? We're going to be talking about Miami Beach. We just came out with some rankings, taking a look at how Miami Beach is operating, how it ranks compared to 22 other, well, I guess as part of 22 markets, sub-markets in the Tri-County South Florida area. So I pulled a bunch of data. I'm going to ask Jenny to give us her insight as to what's going on. Maybe we'll agree, maybe we won't agree, but one thing you can count on is that we're going to give you something to think about. So, Jenny, what's going on? How are you? Happy end of June. And how are you liking the heat so far?
Actually, I don't know if you know this, but Miami is the coolest point on the whole east coast of the United States. We are 90 degrees, and up north they're 102, 105, 103, 98, and we are the coolest. How about
wow. That is amazing. You know, and for disclosure, I must admit, I have one of these dreaded summer colds. This is the type of cold you absolutely hate because when you catch it in the summer, it just makes everything that much worse. So I'm sort of struggling to get by, but we figured we would, soldier on and make sure we do this podcast.
Yeah, Peter, I hope you feel better.
Oh yeah, no, I'll be absolutely fine. So Jen, we're going to be talking about Miami Beach. We're also going to talk about what's going on statistically. We'll talk a little bit about the history. You and I will kick around some stories about Miami Beach, what it used to be like, where it went, and ultimately kind of where it is now. We'll talk about what happened during the pandemic days of twerking on police cars, and then we'll kind of give an overview as to what we could be seeing sometime in the future. Does that sound like it works for you?
That sounds awesome. As you know, we both lived in different times in South Beach, so we really have a good grasp of the area and also North Beach. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So Jenny, let me sort of set the scene. A lot of people, they don't really understand the difference between one town and another town. They all kind of, they combine it all together. For instance, there was a basketball player, a guy called LeBron James. He came to Miami. He made a big announcement when he was leaving Cleveland Cavaliers and he was coming over to Miami. He said he was taking his talents to South Beach. South Beach is actually a neighborhood located in the city of Miami Beach. And where LeBron James was actually playing was on the mainland in Miami. There's about a 5-mile causeway that separates Miami Beach, a barrier island, from the mainland, which is where the arena is. At the time when LeBron James played, it was called the American Airlines Arena. It's now called Kaseya Center. And for what it's worth, Jenny, LeBron James said he was coming here. He's bringing his talents to South Beach. He played in downtown Miami. And where did he end up living? Coconut Grove. So go figure that one.
It's Miami.
It's Miami. Exactly. So a little bit of history for everybody. Miami Beach, it's a municipality. It's a barrier island. A lot of it is man-made. In fact, its southern boundary is actually separated from where Miami Beach is. Why? Because the government came in and they cut through this barrier island and they basically set up Fisher Island to the south completely different entity. You can only get there by helicopter and or boat or ferry. And then you got Miami Beach is going to be to the north. So all the cruise ships, all the cargo ships, everything enters into Biscayne Bay, which is where Port of Miami is. So Miami Beach officially would be to the north. Fisher Island will be to the south. But at one time it was all together. But that just goes to show you a lot of the changes that were done with dredging and trying to build up sellable, developable type of land in Miami. That's really our history.
Yes. Isn't it amazing? I remember that book. It was Miami Babylon. I think that was the one in South Beach. That was an amazing book.
Yes, Miami Babylon. Although I don't know if you can buy it new because I think I think the author got hit with some plagiarism issues.
Yes,
and I think that they stopped selling it. But I think you can get resale. But Miami Babylon, the book, yeah, it was a fascinating book. Kind of gave a history about how everything got to where it was.
Yes, exactly.
So
I love that book.
So Jenny, give people some perspective about Miami Beach. So we got this barrier island. So you got the Atlantic Ocean to the east, and you're going to have the barrier island. Then you'll have Biscayne Bay. Then you'll have the mainland where downtown Miami is, the Design District, places like that. Now, in between the barrier island of Miami Beach, where Miami Beach is located, again, a municipality, and the city of Miami, which is on the mainland, you got a whole cluster of islands. You got like Sunset Islands, and you got Venetian Isles, and a lot of it was all man-made. It was all dredged up. And when they dredged it all up, they tried to figure out what could they do to be able to sell real estate. In fact, West Avenue, which is the western portion of South Beach in Miami Beach, a lot of that is man-made, and it's all dredged up dirt. That's why every single time it rains, it seems like when you go on West Avenue, the whole thing is flooded because the sea is basically taking back what was originally theirs. That's
true. However, they did some construction in order to curve the flooding. So you have they raised some of the streets, so it's better. It's much better now than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now they have different flooding areas, but now West Avenue is better.
Okay, so to give people the kind of the lay of the land, all the way at the southern tip of Miami Beach, today's Miami Beach, because remember, Fisher Island was part of it, but it got cut through over 100 years ago or so. So all the way at the tip, effectively 0th Street, that's called South Point Drive. As you go north, you're going to go all the way up to 87th Terrace. 87th Terrace will be the border and the divider between Miami Beach and the town or village of Surfside. The tower that went down, the Surfside collapse, the Champlain Tower South, that tower is actually located right on the border of Miami Beach. So on the north side of 87th Terrace, that's where you had the Surfside collapse. On the south side, that's where you have the city of Miami Beach, and that's where you have a project called 87 Park that went up. So basically 0, South Point Drive, all the way up to 87th Terrace is going to be City of Miami Beach. Then you're going to break it down into 3 neighborhoods, or 3 submarkets. We break it down by physical boundaries. So what we'll do is we'll go from South Point Drive all the way up to 41st Street. We're going to call that South Beach. A lot of people will not. A lot of people say South Beach is only going to be about 17, maybe a little bit.
25, maybe.
25. Some people say 25. We like to go off causeways, though. So we're going to take it to 41st. 41st to 63rd, we're going to call Middle Beach. And then from 63rd all the way up to 87th, we'll call that North Beach. So we got these 3 areas within there. And generally speaking, the way pricing works is south of 5th. Remember, as you go north, the streets go up. So south of 5th, which is south of 5th Street, that's going to be as soon as you come over the causeway, you come into the mainland. That's the picturesque entrance where you have the cruise ships on the right as you're going east towards Miami Beach, and you have all the islands on the left or on the north. And right when you enter into Miami Beach, you get to 5th Street. So anything to the right when you're entering in Miami Beach off the MacArthur Causeway, that's going to be the south of 5th neighborhood. And the way it was always told is that the wealthy people want to live near the party and the circus and the pretty people, but they don't want to live with them. So all the luxury product got built south of 5th Street for the fat cats, let's say, and all the pretty people in the party was all located north of 5th Street, or it was in the circus. So you could have proximity to the circus, but you didn't necessarily have to live with it. Places like Prime 112, some of the high-end restaurants, they're going to be located south of 5th. All of the chaos, like the $75 margaritas and pina coladas on Ocean Drive, that's going to be located north of 5th Street. Am I getting that right so far?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, a couple tidbits people might have heard about related to Miami Beach. There's a pedestrian mall that's going to go from the Atlantic all the way over to the Bay, Biscayne Bay, and ultimately Intercoastal. And that pedestrian mall is called Lincoln Road. Lincoln Road was created back in, I think it was the 50s or so. And it was doing what it did. It ran into disrepair. And then they brought it back in the 90s or so. You and I were both living in and around there at about that time. So we kind of saw the old school Lincoln Road. Then we saw the new school Lincoln Road, to the point where there's actually an Apple store. There's a few Starbucks on there. There's fine dining on Lincoln Road. So it's really sort of morphed from what used to be a place where everybody sold like tchotchkes, little knickknacks, tourist thing. But suddenly you got some high-end retailers like Apple, as well as some other name brands. Do you remember that? You remember what Lincoln Road used to be like?
Yes, I learned how to rollerblade in Lincoln Road because there was nobody around. I'm definitely taking my idea out, but yeah, it was like 25 years ago. And I learned it was nobody there. It was charming because it had this uniqueness about it. It was like the stores were unique. It was no chain stores or anything like that. And when we saw Gap going and Starbucks and say that this is it, Victoria's Secret top it off. This is the end of what Lincoln Road was. But they did invest a lot of money on that, and now it's a place to go.
Now it's a place to go. So as we continue north up the Barrier Island in the city of Miami Beach, we're going to get into what Middle Beach is what they call it. Middle Beach is where you're going to have a lot of the condos that were built in the late 60s, early 70s, 70s, early 80s. This is where you're going to have like real high, well, not large, a big number of units per building, but massive units. The types of units that back in the day when living in a condo was really sort of a choice. It was a luxury rather than today when it's a necessity. Today you buy into a condo because you can't afford a house. Back then you bought into a condo, and the only reason you did is they offered you all kinds of services. Some of the condominiums, for instance, they'd have restaurants. They would have, you'd have your shuffleboard, you have your spa, you have this, you have that. Today, they don't really have to give you anything, because if you want to buy real estate, especially down in the Miami Beach area, chances are the only thing you're going to be able to afford, if you're a reasonable type of person, is going to be a condo, but you don't get the same perks like you used to have. And I'd say there's a high concentration of those types of units back in what I call the Golden Girls. Remember that sitcom? Like if you're ever up late at night, you can't sleep, you put on TV and they're showing reruns of these women from like the 70s or 80s living in Miami. Yeah, it was that type of vibe. Well, that's where you're going to find, I would argue, a lot of these Golden Girl era types of condos, massive units, not a big number, all kinds of benefits. And they're primarily going to be located in Middle Beach. Would you agree or disagree?
Yes, Middle Beach, and also was called the Millionaires Row for a long time. Now you have to talk about the multi-millions roads in Miami Beach because back then was like the cool thing. Other thing that is important to remember is that the Barrier Island in South Beach, in that area, is very narrow.
True.
So you have the ocean or the intercoastal. And on the other side, they have single family homes. So it's just the condos are restricted to it. And also Miami Beach doesn't allow to have very tall towers, but we'll get there as we progress in the conversation to see how those changes came around later in the history of the beach. But they still have a lower rise or mid rise, about 14 stories, condos, all are newer.
Yeah, well, it might be a good opportunity to say it. There was a Brazilian developer who came in the 90s named Museo Ataíde. So this Brazilian developer came here. He had dreams and visions of building a whole series of condos, high-rise condo towers up and down the Barrier Island in Miami Beach. And he called them the diamonds. So he started off with the blue diamond, the green diamond. He had another site where he was going to do the white diamond. But ultimately, the market fell out with him. He had issues back in Brazil. And lo and behold, he built two of what should have been at least four. The third one, he ended up selling the plans. And that's where they put up a project called Acoya. That's going to be located up in North Beach. So if you're ever driving in North Beach, and that'll be north of 63rd Street, you'll look up and you'll see a building that looks real similar to blue and green diamond, because right at the tip, they have them like illuminated. Well, this Acoya, it still got heads of shape, but they don't illuminate it, and it's in white. It should have been the white diamond, never got built, and then that led to a real that led to repercussions with the residents saying we don't want to give up our quality of life, and as a result, let's put a cap on how high condos could go. So a lot of this happened in the 90s as we were going from a time when they were just saving the Art Deco district, which Jenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Art Deco district. They were just saving it to suddenly new condos were getting built, and there was this pushback about should we put up all kinds of massive condos or should we kind of preserve quality of life? And I would say the people of Miami Beach basically voted for the quality of life in lieu of putting up massive condos. And, it worked to their advantage for quite some time, but now prices are getting extremely high. So why don't you give us your take on the Art Deco district?
Or the Art Deco district, the people of the city was trying to keep that charm of the people who was working hard on the district. Was when South Beach was really poor. A lot of people who retires will live there. A lot of immigrants will be there in the 80s when the city was chaotic and pretty much dangerous as well. And all these people that worked so hard trying to protect it, they never saw the benefits of it. It's pretty weird. They try for years and years. And the next generation or the next group of people was the people who actually took advantage of that and doing like these little pretty hotels with the neon lights and it's so iconic of South Beach to walk at night and see that area. So, but I think they did good in the sense that as protecting the Art Deco district, they also protected the lifestyle of people because they didn't allow towers so high. It's very rare to see high towers. Of course, there's been negotiations, and then we saw the development in South of Fifth where they did big towers, more or less in the late 90s. And then fast forward to 2025, they just approved a 48-story tower and 5 Park, which just opened last year.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And to give everybody a little bit of background, before World War II or during World War II, when the United States got involved, they were training a bunch of soldiers and stuff. So they brought them all down to Miami to be training them. And they took advantage of all the hotel space that was there. Because the hotel space was there, they effectively served as barracks. Not barracks, but accommodations for some of the soldiers. And once the soldiers, after the war, they come back, there was a GI plan where they could basically get money for housing and school and stuff like that. A lot of them decided to return to South Florida. So Miami Beach was a place they knew. So were other places like Key Biscayne. Key Biscayne was a place where there was two brothers, Mackle brothers. They built a series of houses, all targeting these veterans who were returning but had done training and stuff in Miami Beach, as well as in the city of Miami during World War II and everything that was involved with that.
That's why they do have that area in Normandy Isles where they have all the names of the wars and it's all army names because they bought houses there right after the war. So Miami Beach is just an eclectic place because it has a lot of history and a lot of contrast too, because it's rare to see a place where actually the people live, like the people that work in the service industry, in the same area. Normally, people would have to commute, because it's way too expensive. But Miami Beach has areas that are actually, I'm not going to say affordable, kind of affordable at this time.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it too, and that's a perfect segue into North Beach. North Beach, traditionally, that was a place where people were working in the hotels in South Beach or working to the north in places like Bell Harbor, Surfside, or even Sunny Isles Beach. So people could live in North Beach. They could have access to the sand. They'd have access to where their jobs were to the south, i.e. South Beach, or to the north in Bell Harbor, or remember, Shops at Bell Harbor's right there, or in Sunny Isles Beach. And yet you had kind of the best of both worlds. So that North Beach area, that was also an area that was sort of eclectic. It was an area with a lot of characters, personalities. It's also an area where a lot of foreign correspondents, when they're based out of Miami, they would all set up shop there because it was a very unique, distinct type of place. And if the journalists weren't making a lot, that was a place where they could basically be near the sand and be able to enjoy the real Miami Beach lifestyle on their salary, which probably was pittance if they weren't doing TV. If they were doing print, they were definitely living in North Beach.
Agree. Interesting enough about North Beach, 'cause I lived there for 10 years, is that it became a real international melting pot, especially South American. So it was a lot of Argentinian, Brazilians, Colombians, and Peruvians, for example. If you see in one block Venezuelans, in the same block of restaurant, you will see one of each country. So it was very charming in that sense. Still is, and now it's getting developed.
Yes, it
Now
is
it's
getting
getting developed.
So to give people context, so to the north of Miami Beach, remember 87 Terrace, you're going to have Surfside. To the west, coming in off 79th Street on the mainland, when you come into the beach, it's not perfectly lined up. When you come into the beach, it's going to be 71st Street, 71. When you go west on the mainland, it's going to be 79th. In between there is a village. A village or a
North
town.
Bay Village.
Yeah,
North Bay Village.
North Bay Village, basically man-made islands put together, and they have single family, and they also have multifamily, and they got a strip of retail space. That would be known as the 79th Street Causeway or the JFK, the Kennedy Causeway. So again, all kind of man-made stuff that they kind of, put together through dredging and thinking about how do we sell this reclaimed water.
Yes, absolutely. And they do have a lot of mansions there. I'm a paddle boarder, so I paddle board on the islands, all the South Beach Islands, all the North Bay Village Islands. So I saw you can see like amazing mansions, and then you paddle like half a mile, and then you see all their buildings like condos on the water. So we have a lot of waterways there, and that's why that area is so pretty. Miami has a lot of waterways, man-made, basically, but some of them are super exclusive and some of them are not.
Yeah, that's the part. Some of them are not. You would think that type of dirt, that type of access to the water, that type of view, it would really be over the top. But there are still opportunities available there, something reasonably priced. And why are they reasonably priced? Because the areas have still not come around for whatever reason. They're a little bit gritty. They can be a little bit sketchy. They're not prim and proper and, with a nice twist on it. They can be a little bit challenging. They give you kind of an idea of what it used to be like in the 90s, at least in down the South Beach area before the boom really occurred.
Yes, it's, of course, we have a lot of shifts in the people who actually live here or work here, after, and that was a big change that I was able to witness is when Versace got killed. Before that, it was all the Europeans models, European TV. They were doing a lot of things in Miami Beach, and after that happened, it was like an exodus of the Europeans. They're back. They're back. Especially Italians. You see a lot of Italians and Spaniards still here, coming back. But back in the time, we're like, wow, like it was this incredible shift. And then they start another cities promoting Miami Beach, and then it's when you see all these changes. People say, how? Why is it so different now? I say, well, because something really big pop culture happened. And it was pretty bad.
Jen, you hit on a key point. So South Beach, when it was coming back around, and let's kind of give people a little bit of background on it. So I didn't get here till 1993. I've spoken to a lot of people I've read, and I've taken tours and stuff like that. But generally speaking, real dumbed down version of it. So remember, you had all these old hotels that were around, these Art Deco types. When people used to come down here, they were able to take the train down. Took the train down. They would winter down here. This is kind of where the snowburn situation came about. Then you had the soldiers who were staying in the hotels when they were doing training before going off to war. Then after the war ends, they come down here. People continue to vacation in Miami Beach. You had a guy at the time called Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason was a big star on television. They actually have a performing arts center in Miami Beach named after him. There was actually a radio broadcaster. 41st Street's actually named after him. So there was a lot of hoopla, a lot of attention provided to Miami Beach using the media and talking about how the great place it was while everybody was freezing. it gave everybody the aspiration. You're living the American dream. You save up some money, then you can go down there and you can vacation and kind of take it all in. So all that kind of happened. It all kind of morphed. And then lo and behold, you get the Mariel boat lift. Mariel boat lift occurs 1980, something
80.
like that. Yeah. Huge number of people come in. And from everything I've read, again, because of all the accommodation, this is a place where you can kind of keep people while you're trying to figure it all out, because so many
Mhm.
people from Cuba were able to get into the United States. Many of them were kept there, and it kind of mixed with what had been like a retiree crowd, and it sort of led to some changes. Parts of it are depicted in the Scarface movie. I'm not saying it's fact or fiction,
Mhm.
but that's kind of how that's what the reputation was. So you had this reputation of Miami Beach being a little bit sketchy. It was dangerous, crime rate, blah 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 blah. And then fast forward, you get these people come in, they see the Art Deco. There's a movement to try to knock down everything and put up big towers, kind of sell out, kind of like a place like Sunny House Beach would do. But yet the community is able to stop it. They maintain it, they preserve it. You have people renovating these 2 and 3-story Art Deco design buildings. Keep in mind, a lot of these apartments are what, 300, 400, 500 square feet. They weren't made to be residents. Yeah. They were made to be like a winter a place you could stay for 2,
Mhm.
3, 4 months during the winter. You weren't living there year round. So far so good. You jiving with everything I'm saying so far?
Yeah, so far so good. I think people had to get used to listen fast what you say. Somebody told me, Peter speaks so fast. I say, he always say, you have to listen fast
Yeah, you
because
have to
I don't
listen
slow
fast.
down. Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely, yes. It's just like so many things that happened in Miami Beach throughout the history. The 50s was like the golden era in like Fontainebleau and all this glamour. And then the 90s, the 80s was like terrible. And then the 90s, everybody comes down like from different parts of the world. And then we had the 2000s and it was interesting time. And then now it's 2025. So we have a lot of history that is interesting because when you go there, every time you go there, you had like you can just imagine, how it was in the years in the 20s, for example. Therefore, these spaces are like the closet is teeny tiny because they didn't want to they didn't need to have a huge closet or anything like that. So the construction inside these places are almost like a dollhouse, are pretty tiny, like teeny kitchens and everything is super small.
And
And
no,
the
no,
jealousy windows,
and no, yeah,
no
jealousy
air
windows.
conditioning.
Yeah, jealousy windows. Those are the ones where you turn them and there's like little
Yeah.
panes and they go up. So those are always great in the summer because when it's pissing down rain outside, it's hot. It gives easy access for cover for the roaches, all the big roaches
Uh,
that are like the size of your middle finger. They can all kind of climb in. It doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to keep them out of Miami Beach because of all the old jealousy windows. When I first got to South Beach in '93, no, I lived in South Beach '94. It was still real sketchy. In fact, you didn't go south of Fifth Street. So the area that
right.
became the go-to area, you didn't even go down there because that was really the sketchy part between effectively Fifth and what effectively would become Lincoln Road, the Lincoln Road that people know today. That was like the only real area. So there were issues involved with it. You had to worry about crime, petty crime, people busting your
Mhm.
windows, stealing stuff. I don't know how much of it was drug related. I don't know how much of it was just like riffraff
No,
or
it
just,
was. It
yeah.
was. It was drug related because I remember when I came to live in the States in 92, 93, my friend was married with a police man from Miami Beach. And I say, well, I want to move to the beach. And he like, no, don't move to Miami Beach. You're crazy. It's very dangerous. I'm like, no, it's not dangerous. I love it there. The beach is awesome. It has a lot of character. Of course, I did what he told me not to do and I went to live there. But yes, I guess he knew because he was a policeman. But yeah, it wasn't pretty much clean up. Now it's like any other city. Like you have crime still, but if you compare with the 80s, it is paradise. Remember, there wasn't a Time magazine in the 80s. I do remember that because of the cocaine cowboys.
Yeah, Paradise
documentary,
Lost. Yeah.
Paradise Lost. I just remember that
Yeah, the
magazine,
yep.
the
Time
cover, the
Magazine,
cover
the
of the
cover.
magazine.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well,
So now it's yeah.
and
Go
that
ahead.
kind of takes me to Versace. You mentioned Gianni Versace. So he was this Italian designer, and because I guess the modeling agencies or industry, they wanted places where they could shoot, where the light was great and it was kind of gritty. It gave them that vibe, and yet it was cheap. So supposedly, a lot of model shoots were going on in South Africa as well as South Beach. They could come in there, they could basically take over the street. They didn't have to worry about having to deal with all kind of tourists and stuff because it was kind of a no-go area. So he comes down, he buys two hotels. He gets City of Miami Beach to approve him knocking down one of them to make a pool right there on Ocean Drive. And he ends up living in one. Next to it is a swimming pool because he knocked down a hotel. And then there was a place called News Cafe, 4 blocks down. He would walk down to every morning. He would get, that's back in the day when you had to get newspapers. You go down there, you get the newspaper, you could have breakfast. You were right there on Ocean Drive. You had the sand, you had the smell of the sea, you had all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So he'd go back and forth. And that ultimately is where he was murdered, right when he was going into his home. There was a guy called Andrew Cunanan back in, I think it was 1997. He guns him down. And I would almost argue that once Versace died, it all kind of changed in terms of the magnet, the appeal, the lure of kind of those jet setters who were coming to Miami Beach.
Absolutely.
And then over the course of time, it became different people. More recently, you had your crypto bro types,
Yes.
who were coming in. But Miami Beach always seems to change, like every 5, 7, 10 years. Whenever it's hot, all of a sudden everybody's here. Remember Madonna? She used to hang out in South Beach late 90s, and she had a lover who had a club right there on Washington. And then, going back, what was it? Desi Arnaz from that show, I Love Lucy, back in the day. It was that black and white show with Lucille
Lucy
Ball.
Ball.
Yeah. So there's Miami Beach has always been one of these places that kind of captures the attention, not only of the U.S. culture, but even, cultures overseas.
Absolutely. It's a real melting pot. And then in the 2000s to middle of the 2000s, a big New York community came to South Beach, and they loved it, and they stay. They move for good, not for vacations, but for good. Yeah, it's just like they feel so comfortable because, the cultural affinity is super important in the place you live. And the South of Fifth, has like a vibe of, it's wealthier. So you have people that is rich from all over the world in that area. And then you have the tourist area where you don't hang out when you live on the beach. And then it's just like you can stay there and live there and don't need to go to the city for anything, really.
Now, Jenny, you were saying early 2000s. Well, if you remember before the internet bubble popped in early 2000, there was actually a movement to try to take Lincoln Road, which effectively is like, what would you call it, like 17th Terrace or something? Pedestrian mall that goes, it goes from the Atlantic to the Intercoastal to the Bay, right there, pedestrian mall. And they were trying to turn it into what was called Silicon Beach. They wanted to bring in all these internet companies that would come set up shop there. And in this way, venture capital money could also come down. All these companies out of Latin America this could become like a meeting point if you want to get funding, whatever the case may be. So they started that. They, Lennar, the home builder, they have a commercial division. That commercial division actually built an office building for this. The market collapses. Lo and behold, nobody needs the office space. So Lennar's division has to turn around and send its people with ties and white shirts into South Beach, where everybody else is wandering around with who knows what, and are they even wearing any clothes? So it was really kind of interesting the way things changed after the tech bubble or internet bubble crashed.
I forgot about that. Remember Telefonica and Google, and everybody was looking at that. The Netscape, all these guys with the internet. It's just that they have so many different people coming and going, actually, after a few years. So, but the Miami Beach has also a real community, like families and like families forever, like a lot of different families that are here for the last 80 years. So they do have their mansions and the schools and all that. It's also very important to mention because Miami Beach has really limited land because it's not unlimited like in the city. When you go west, you can go to the Everglades, but Miami Beach is not. Therefore, it's low density, not pro huge towers unless you give a park to the city and then you can build up, and therefore it's more expensive, the land itself. So the new construction is super pricey.
Now, I do remember, Miami Beach during the Great Recession, it had a lot of buildings. They got hit hard. There were a lot of people who bought these condos. They all bought in. They were paying prices thinking, oh my God, I'm in Miami Beach. It can never go down. And lo and behold, a lot of these condos and these projects, they went to hell. For instance, what was that project across from Prime 112 that ultimately was selling at deep discounts? What was it called? Ocean House or something? Right over there, about second in Ocean Drive.
It was the Ocean 8 or something like that. It was like a big units that we went to see clients.
Yeah,
referring to that.
It was right about First, in Ocean Drive, across from Prime 112. Yes. Yeah, that was one where they were trying to sell it in bulk. They were just trying to sell out the whole thing. You would go take a look at.
Continuum. You're talking about not a Continuum, across the street from the Continuum?
No, across the street from Prime 112.
From Prime 112.
Yeah, I think it was called Ocean House.
Ocean House, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
It is Ocean House. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was a property, just to give you an idea, because they say, prices never go down. That project, Ocean House, located right across from Prime 112, a destination, a restaurant, a lot of people would know, south of Fifth, and it was selling in bulk. It was selling at deep discounts. Why? Because the market got too far ahead of itself. Once the market went sideways, lo and behold, the only way the developer could kind of get out was to, let it go for a song. So you had all kinds of situations like that where the money came in big, and lo and behold, there was a pullback.
Yes, yeah, you're right. They did recuperate, of course, because the location and the sand is the sand. But yes, they were able to. Some people was able to grab some of that opportunities down south of Fifth. They call it Sophie.
Yeah.
Sophie. Yeah.
Okay, so let's then fast forward to the next decade. Decade of 2010 onward. This is where we get a gentleman of Argentina called Ellen Faina. He comes up here and he's known for wearing a white hat. And I don't know if he wears a white outfit, but he always wears a white hat.
All in white.
So he goes out and buys some old hotels in and around, what would you call it, 38th Street in Collins or so? 36 in Collins. Yeah, and he wants to create the whole Faina district. He creates some sort of community center. He built some condos. One of the big things they're known for is they're able to bring in a Russian oligarch. Russian oligarch is a money supplier. And his big thing is this oligarch is that he somehow, some way bought a golden woolly mammoth and he didn't have any place to put it. So he decides, well, the best place to put it is, why don't we put it out on the patio at sea level of the Faina Hotel. So when you go to the Faina Hotel and you walk through the patio area, and if you want to get out to the sand, you would see this glass encased golden woolly mammoth from this Russian oligarch. Do you remember that?
Yeah, actually I did. For real estate, I did a video. I don't remember. I don't think it was live, but I did a video on because it was amazing. I mean, it was like $15 million. I think it was more than that, or it's probably more than that now. But do you remember the article that they say that if we have like a big storm or anything, the mammoth was going to be under the water? Do you remember that?
Yeah. There was a story about climate change.
Yes.
I think it was, I don't know if it was the New Yorker or the Atlantic. It was kind of a highbrow type of magazine. And what they said is, with global sea level rise, at some point, if Miami Beach is basically, if it succumbs to the water, the woolly mammoth could actually be a dive site. Just like when you go to Key Largo, they got praying Jesus. So you go down, you dive, and there's a Jesus statue for people to dive. So they were saying in the magazine that, lo and behold, the woolly mammoth could simply be a dive site because the water was going to overtake all of Miami Beach and was all going to be washed away. It was going to be Atlantis, if you will.
Yes, yes, and definitely, probably in the next 100 years, we're not gonna be here doing podcasts. It might happen actually.
So Alan Faina, he builds his project. You get projects like the Addition going in there where they decide.
Mhm.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Let's go ahead and build a condo. Let's put an ice rink in this condo on the beach across from the sand because everybody wants to go ice skating when that's the first thing you think of when you go to the a Miami Beach condo or a hotel. So you had all these crazy, crazy, crazy stories that kind of went into place. Lo and behold, the market kind of goes sideways. People are not able to get what they expect. People like Ken Griffin, the billionaire with $42 billion net worth, the ones who made a huge investment over on the mainland, he bought some condos on the Faino project and didn't necessarily do well. So did a bunch of Wall Street insiders with the Apollos, hedge funds of the world. These people went in there, and in order for them to unload, they didn't get back what they paid for it. So it just
No.
shows you a lot of people are always attracted to Miami Beach. They fall in love with it, but it doesn't always end well. Which brings us back to Ellen Faina, the guy with the hat with the Faina district. Basically, he had to pack his stuff and leave. He sold his house. He's now returned. He's doing some project on the river, but the properties that he had put together, they've now been, I guess, I don't know if he's still involved with some way, but now they're going to build like a Aman hotel.
Leman Hotel,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. So it's completely different than the Faina district. And it kind of goes to what they always say. A developer, when they're building the first time down here in Miami, if you can fight to live another day on the second project, you're probably going to make it. But that first one is always
Yeah.
difficult. So when you build in Miami, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you leave with. And Faina is probably a perfect example. But he is being brought back, or he's decided to come back, and now they're gonna give up on the beach and come over to the mainland.
I had to question a little bit his decisions.
So this is the perfect segue now to get into sort of some of the stats. I want to give everybody kind
Okay.
of the feel of it. So we
Yeah.
we do an index every Tuesday. We update 22 markets, actually 23 markets throughout South Florida. One of the markets will be Tri-County, South Florida area. Then we'll break it out for Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties, and then we break it down per submarket. So at the end of May, we ran the numbers based on the index, and the index is created by taking active listings as well as pending sales
Mhm.
and trying to give you real time what's going on week over week over week rather than closed sales, which will reflect what happened last week. It happened 30 days ago, or maybe it happened 90 days ago. We want to give you
Yeah.
kind of up to date. So based on the index, we went through and we ranked everything and we broke it down into two categories. One is overall condos. This is all condos. The other category is vintage condos. These are condos 30 years or more. There's legislation that came about as a result of the Surfside collapse back in June of 2021. And now buildings have to get a major inspection done at year 30 in their lifespan based on the certificate of occupancy. So we call those, when they have to come up with this big inspection, we call those vintage condos. So let me tell you where Miami Beach is ranking. After all of the history we just talked about, how is Miami Beach actually doing? And this will be based on our ranking. So if you take a look at overall condos, the overall average in South Florida for a market is 7.18. 7.18, again, combination of active listings and pending sales. The idea is every time you get another listing, you ought to get another sale. They ought to move in unison. So the higher the number, the better. The lower the number, the worse. So Miami Beach is coming in at 7.09 versus the South Florida average of 7.18. Miami Beach is ranked as the 11th best or the 11th worst market because there's 22 markets and Miami Beach coming right there at 11. It's right behind Bell Harbor and right ahead of Pompano Beach. So,
Mhm.
so tell us about the Miami Beach market from everything you're seeing. Does it look like an average type of market? And if so,
Yeah.
why? Does it have to do with pricing? What do you think it has to do with?
Well, as we just were talking about history and locations, they have these areas are super wealthy, and then they have areas that are middle range, and then there are areas that are real old product and small units. So I am sure there is a lot of um, the difference between the new towers, anything after 2010, maybe, or yeah, less than 30 years. And the units that are there from since the 30s, it's just huge difference. Prices, spaces, amenities, parking. There's a lot of different issues. Miami Beach is very limited or no parking in most of the Art Deco district. So that will make the numbers to look, if you look at the overall market, they might look strange because they're gonna have this super high end to this super low end.
Got
So
it. Got
tell
it.
me the
Got it.
numbers. So let's talk about the numbers.
Well, we can talk about them first, but let me kind of set the scene. Let's go into vintage. Vintage, again, is going to be 30 years or more for these buildings.
Yeah.
These would be a lot of the ones that were built right when South Beach was starting to come around. So call
Yeah.
it 1995 and earlier. So on the vintage side, Miami Beach is coming in. Let's see here. Miami Beach, the overall South Florida average for vintage based on the index, 7.05. 7.05. Miami Beach comes in at 6.00. 6.00. So Miami Beach is right behind Pompano Beach, which is an old ass community that's going through some kind of restoration right now in northern Broward County, and it's ahead of Sunny Isles Beach, which is struggling right now because of the amount of old product on the west side, and you got all the new product on the east side, and you also have the problem with all the sinking going on, according to the University of Miami study. So that kind of shows you where Miami Beach is. They're not necessarily punching above their weight. If anything, they're punching below their weight. I think if you spoke to somebody in Miami Beach and you say, hey, listen, your vintage market is comparable to Pompano Beach and Sunny Isles, I bet a lot of them would be shocked by
Yeah.
that in Miami Beach.
They'll be shocked. And I think one of the reasons is because of the Surfside settlement or tragedy that brings up the real problems that a lot of these towers are. Like I was telling you, I was doing with my Rotary Club a beach cleaning over the weekend, and I was walking in Collins Avenue in the art district, everything from 7th to 15th, and I was looking at these older condos. I was like, oh my God, this this doesn't look good at all. Like it's in the structure, in the structural side of it. Not the way they look, because that was the architecture at the time, but more like I was just really kind of looking at the buildings in a different way, because now we have to anticipate problems that we never thought about it before when we think about real estate. Oh yeah, it is older, but the price is nice. Now you have to really think about it in a different way after that happened.
And
But
this
yes,
is probably a great time to tell everybody. So Surfside occurs, Surfside collapse, and nearly 100 people die. $1 billion with a B settlements paid out to the families of the victims. Insurance companies don't like to get in the business of paying out money. Therefore, they want to put it on the state and or the condo association to do everything they can to make sure that these buildings are safe. A bunch of legislation gets passed. Kind of break it down real simple. Every 10 years, you got something called a structural integrity reserve study. We have to go in, you have to inspect the building, you have to figure out what's going on with the structure. Then you got to figure out what is the lifespan for all of the key components. A lot of it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And then after that, you come up with a marching orders for a 10-year period. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to fund it? Yada, yada, yada. Then at year 30, you're going to do this real in-depth study called a milestone inspection report. That's at year 30. So every 10 years, you got this structural integrity reserve study. Year 30, you have this milestone inspection. Miami-Dade County, because of a building that collapsed back in 1974, 75, as well as issues that came about because of Hurricane Andrew, Miami-Dade County, as well as Broward County, they had a little bit different rules. They had something called a 40-year recertification, where buildings had to go through at the 40-year mark and go ahead and get recertified. And the reason the 40-year mark came up, based on everything I've read, is the fact that this building that had collapsed in Miami, it was actually a building that was occupied by the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. When the building collapsed, it was at year 40. So they simply adopted the rule that, okay, at year 40, maybe these buildings are vulnerable. So that kind of went into place. So at least in Dade and Broward County, they were starting to take a look at the stuff. But now statewide, with a few exceptions, everybody has to suddenly start to do these inspections. So again, every 10 years, structural integrity reserve study. Again, take a look at it, figure out what it's going to cost, allocate money to pay for it going forward. And then 30-year mark, you got to do a milestone inspection, the big inspection sort of related to that. So I guess, John, what I would say, if anybody's listening to us and they are thinking about buying one of these older buildings, because we're going to get the pricing real quick. There's a big difference between buying a vintage condo, 30 years or more, versus a overall condo. One way you could sort of give yourself some reassurance is to make sure that the condo you buy in, they're going to give you a copy of a study. It's either going to be it'll be the appropriate study, whether it's a structural integrity reserve study called a SIRS or a milestone inspection report, which comes at the year 30. So, and these reports are done by licensed engineers and licensed architects who could face, including criminal penalties, if something's shady or sketchy with this. And keep in mind, these reports are going to be what's used by lenders to go ahead and finance restoration work. So there's a lot on the line when that licensed engineer or licensed architect signs off on one of these buildings. So Jenny, is that a way, like with your customers? Are they opting where the building that they're thinking about buying, it has to have one of these reports completed, or are some of them just saying, I don't care, I'm going to buy it because it's good price, good value?
You have both scenarios. Most people that is conservative on their investments, they say, no, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to go there. But people that see something on on the price range below or on $200,000, which doesn't give you anything anywhere else, they say, let's go for it and we figure out later on. Of course, they're going to ask for a discount based on the uncertainty. But yeah, you can have clients for both.
Okay. And that's a perfect segue. Let's get into the numbers of Miami Beach. Remember, they're ranking right there in the middle of all of South Florida in the neighborhood of Pompano Beach and Sunny Isles. Miami Beach used to stand alone on its own. It was like the place to go to in the 90s and early 2000s, and even the beginning of the 10s. But now in the 20s, it doesn't necessarily seem to be doing as well. So here's what we got going on Miami Beach. Right now in Miami Beach, it looks like there's about 2,100 condos for sale. During the winter buying season, which went from November through April, it looks like there were about 711 units that sold. 711 units sold in a 6-month period. So that is going to give us, it's an average of about 119 sales a month. During the winter, the peak time, November through April, when everybody's coming down here, you got Art Basel going on, which is a big international arts festival. You got all the events, the South Beach Food and Wine Show. You have all kinds of stuff going on. But they sold 711 units, or about 119 a month. Now, if you take those 119 units that traded during the peak of the winter, you divide it into what's on the market today, 2,100 units. We're looking at 18 months of supply. Typically, equilibrium is 6 months. Less than 6 months of supply or resales means the seller's got the advantage. More than 6 months says the buyer has the advantage because there's plenty to choose from. Right now in Miami Beach, we're looking at 18 months of supply. Some people will say, yeah, but to live in Miami Beach, you have more money than God, and you're not going to be influenced for any kind of indicators. What say you, Jenny?
Yeah, buyer's market, baby. It's buyer's market time, and I think it's a lot of things happening that give us these results or these stats, because these interest rates are so high. Insurance is high, and also the lenders are more skeptical to lend in the older buildings for a logical reason. So it's for people that doesn't have the money cash to buy, it's gonna be difficult. Now, if the prices go low enough, then it will be cash. Cash is gonna be king, like in the last time. So it's gonna be buyers 2025 with the rest of the year and 2026, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about the vintage really quick. These vintage units, again, 30 years or more. These are the ones that have to complete their milestone inspection report. So on the vintage side, you got about 1,400 for sale, 1,400 out of 2,100 overall. So it's about 67% of the market in Miami Beach is going to be the vintage. In the winter buying season, November through April, November 24 through April 25, you had about 466 sell, and are about 78 a month. If you do some rough math, again, you're going to get 18 months of supply. So it doesn't matter if you look at overall or if you look at vintage, 18 months of supply is what's out there. Now, interesting enough, the asking price for condos in Miami Beach today, $1.6 million per unit, $1.6 million. And what are the vintage for sale for? $704,000 per unit.
That's a lot.
That's a big, you're talking $900,000 discount or lower asking price on a vintage versus a regular condo. and
Yeah.
overall condo. So how do you overcome that? Well, some will say you make sure you buy into a building or a community that's completed their study. And if they've completed their study, a licensed architect, a licensed engineer has signed
Mhm.
off on it. There's a roadmap of how to make it safe. And all of the experts are saying it's okay. And there's money available to go ahead and fix it. So, would buyers do that for a 55% discount effectively is what it is. So you're paying 45 cents on the dollar. If you look at the overall market versus what a vintage unit goes for. Now let's talk about what do they actually trade for? So during the winter buying season of November of 24 through April of 25, average Miami Beach condo traded for $1.2 million. $1.2
Oh,
million.
wow.
What did the vintage units trade for? 620,000. 620,000. So about 49% less than what you had, 50% less of what you had for the overall condo. Again, it makes you wonder, maybe I should go ahead and take a look at one of these vintage units. But then you get the reality of what you were saying. You were out there on the weekend cleaning up the bay and doing stuff, and you're walking around and you're saying to yourself, do I really want to be in one of these buildings?
Right. Yeah. It's just, I guess there is people for everything, but I feel like the prices are still high, even though it's a buyer's market. I don't see the correction yet. I don't see that it's really going down to the price that the people actually want to move. There are some instances, as there are some examples of good deals. So you have to just to find them and move fast. But in like the beach and the city, I think we are in the moment that we are kind of like stuck.
Yeah. Well, let me just hit on some quick stats before we get to our infamous 1% rule, which 100% you love. So I'm going to bring it up though. So in Miami Beach, average price per square foot, about $997 a foot is what they're asking. Vintage, $701 a foot. So about 30% cheaper to go after vintage versus overall condos. And what did the units trade for in the winter buying season? November of 24 through April of 25, $869 a foot. They traded for vintage condos went for $586 a foot. So again, you're saving 30 cents on the dollar, if you will, or you're paying 70 cents on the dollar. And then finally, of the condos that are on the market today, the overall condos, they've been on the market 159 days and counting without
Wow.
trading or transacting. During the winter, they went on the market, they went under contract, they closed in 107 days. So the condos today for sale in Miami Beach, they're already on the market 52 days longer than what it took the entire process during the winter. Keeping in mind, once a property goes under contract, you're probably looking at minimum 30, but more likely 60 days to
60
close.
days.
Yeah. So if we just forecast out today, your typical condo, Miami Beach, 159 days, let's add 60 days to it. Now we're talking, what are we talking? 7 months or so minimum. And most listings are going to come in at 6 months. So if you're a realtor, you want to take on a condo that's going to sit on the market for more than 6 months, you're going to lose the listing. And then lo and behold, the person who comes downstream is able to take advantage of the fact that the seller is now beaten down. They're going to start to adjust their price, but they're going to give it to somebody else to sell. So
Yeah.
this is where it sort of creates all kinds of issues for people in the real estate industry.
Yes, absolutely. That's a reality right now. If it's not worth price, it's not worth the effort to list. They're
Exactly.
concentrating buyers. I know people don't like to in general in our industry, people do not like to buy with buyers, but if you are good with buyers, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah. So speaking about Goodwood buyers, this is the thing I love, and this is what a lot of people in the industry hate. It's called the 1% rule. Every week I beat Jenny up about this. Every week she tells me I'm crazy. The 1% rule is very simple. It's a back of the napkin a way to figure out, should I do due diligence and take a look at a building or at a unit that I potentially will buy? And the idea is to look at it from an investor perspective, not as somebody who's going to have their forever home, which, by the way, I think is a terrible idea. I think you ought to be moving regularly, because if you have your forever home, I don't know that those days still exist anymore, but especially in condos. So the 1% rule is real simple. Whatever my monthly rent is, it needs to represent 1% of the value. For instance, a $100,000 condo needs $1,000 a month rent. A $1 million condo needs $10,000 a month rent. So that friend you talk to when you go to a barbecue, or maybe you're over at his place and he tells you paid $300,000 for his condo, now it's worth $1 million. The question you ask him is, how much are you getting in rent? And if he tells you he's getting $5,000 a month, but he thinks it's worth $1 million, The reality is it's worth 500 grand. Now, it's not to say you can't make exceptions, but it helps you to eliminate a bunch of the noise because there are so many condos out there. Remember, in Tri-County, South Florida area alone, 610,000 units. So you need to eliminate stuff that's not in the ballpark. So if you use this 1% rule back in the napkin, you can figure out, okay, should I even take a look at it, or does it not make any sense? So that's the 1% rule. And let me tell you how the 1% rule shakes out of Miami Beach. So Miami Beach today, the average asking price, $1.6 million a door. And what do they trade for? $1.2 million. So the people who bought during the winter at $1.2 million, they need $12,000 a month rent to adhere to the 1% rule. The people that are for sale today, $1.6 million average, they need $16,000 a month rent in order to cover the 1% rule. So
Right.
$16,000 if you're going in new, and if you bought during the winter, $12,000 a month. That's what you need to adhere to the 1% rule. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the rents are. So the rents today, the asking price of Miami Beach, this is median. And rental data, I should tell you, is notoriously bad because it's so splintered. REITs, real estate investment trusts, these groups that have 300 units in a building and they have a for rent sign hanging on it, they're not using realtors because they're not using realtors. All of their information's internally. They hire people, they put them in a leasing office, these people go ahead and they rent it out. Any information that comes in the rental market is either going to be a survey by calling up these leasing agents sitting in the office, or going through the multiple listing service. The multiple listing service, a commission has to be paid. So a group with 300 units, they don't want to use a realtor. They want to pay somebody to sit inside a leasing office and sign it because they'll make a lot more money. So the numbers I'm going to give you are coming from the multiple listing service. So these are going to be realtors. And again, just to remind you, asking price today for Miami Beach condo, $1.6 million, which means 16 grand a month rent. And transactions during the winter buying season in Miami Beach, $1.2 million or $12,000 a month rent. What is the median asking price today in Miami Beach? $3,500. $3,500. Now, wait, there's more. What did the places rent for in Miami Beach during the winter buying season? $2,700. So you're going to tell me, I'm going to go in there today, I'm going to pay $1.6 million for a condo. And if I turn around to rent it, everybody's asking $3,500 a month, but in reality, they really got $2,700 a month. How does that make sense, if at all? And I know, Jenny, you're going to tell me, well, yeah, but people who buy it, they don't want people to rent it. They're not going to rent it. They're going to live there. It's their home. They worked all their life. They earned it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but things change. How about all these work from home people who came down here during the pandemic, and then lo and behold, Google and everybody in Silicon Valley called them back and said, listen, you got to be in Silicon Valley. What about all these bankers, investment bankers, work for JP Morgan and others who are working down here in the firms based in New York City? And Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan, calls them back. So what do you do with your condo? You try to rent it. Now, if you paid 1.2 a door and you're looking at maybe $3,500 a month rent, how do you make those numbers work? And that's before special assessments are related to the Surfside condo collapse.
Right.
And our ballpark is under up to 3 units, 25 grand a door special assessment, 4 to 14 floors, 50 to 75 grand, and 15 floors or higher, 100 grand a unit. And these are payments that have to be made within a year, or there's a loan that's taken out by the association, and that means your maintenance fees go up. So Jenny, are people able to square the numbers if they buy a condo in Miami Beach at current pricing?
No. And no.
You're not even going to give me a fight back? There's not even pushback?
Well, the 1% rule doesn't apply. It's just like, no, really doesn't. Because I'm just, like you were talking, I'm thinking, like in examples and things like that, like it just like everybody's subsidizing renters because they are thinking that they'll be able to sell it at some point for whatever they pay for or more than that. But if your game is to buy to rent, the numbers do not work. Not here in Miami Beach, in Miami or in Miami Beach. They just do not work.
So Jenny, what you're saying is the people going in and buying, they're betting long term on the neighborhood and on the unit. and they're willing, as part of their carrying costs, they're willing to subsidize somebody to live in there, and the owner will basically cover the costs because they want to get to the other side and they need some kind of cash flow in. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yes, they need the cash flow, and they just don't thrill to rent it for way less than the 1%, but they're forced to it because you still have to pay maintenance, even if you don't have a loan. Let's say that you don't have a loan and you pay cash for it, then it's not too bad. But if you have some sort of financing, then you are really subsidizing the rent. And if you do not subsidize the renter, then you're gonna have to sell it. And if the market is a buyer's market, then you're gonna have to take a haircut. And this is when we think is gonna happen. My not my fight or my resistance of the 1% rule is like I see it in very, very specific places. It's not the rule of the thumb in any given market in South Florida, for that matter.
Although I keep finding them. I
know.
We're going to be doing,
But
we're going
they're
to be,
all Airbnb. You haven't find one that is like a condo, like a regular condo. Perhaps it works in a condo like has no parking, no pool, things like that. But if you want the amenities, chances are that you're subsidizing the renter.
so that being said, and this is rhetorical in case unless you want to answer it, that being said, it makes more sense to rent a unit in Miami Beach because your cost is going to be less than to actually own it. Even if you're paying exorbitant rent in Miami Beach, it's still probably cheaper than the carry associated with that. Because keep in mind, in Miami Beach, what does maintenance start at? $1.25 a square foot or so?
Yes.
Per
around
month.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So 1,000 square foot place, you got $1.20. You got $1,250 there, and then property tax. Jenny, if they sold for $1.2 million a door, your property tax is 2%. You're looking at $24,000. You're looking at $2,000 a month. So I got $2,000 on the property tax. I got $1,250 on the maintenance fees every single month. This is before we get into debt service. This is before we get into anything else. This is before we get into special assessment. So you got to think, unless there's a pullback in pricing, it makes more sense to rent in Miami Beach than it does to actually buy in Miami Beach, at least for the time being. But Jenny, we've seen in the past, and I mentioned it earlier, there was a luxury project that went up across from Prime 112, south of 5th, right on Ocean Drive and like First, Ocean House. That thing was selling in bulk. That thing was selling at a deep discount. So there is a history in Miami Beach of distress deals. In fact, just to put my Wayback Machine hat on, the city of Miami Beach, they have like a housing department. They actually went in and bought a project in bulk at a deep discount right off of Lincoln Road. And they bought it so cheap. These were developers who were going to convert. They ended up losing their behinds, and City of Miami Beach bought it, and then they turned it into workforce type of housing. So even the City of Miami Beach was participating in this situation where we get these massive increases and then we have these decreases.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible because then you have lots of new construction coming in. So how do you justify that? So it's just, of course, people want newer construction because newer construction means that you're going to have peace of mind for the next 30 years, at least on the building side. And
unless they sink. Remember the University of Miami study? It talked about 35 towers in the barrier island that are sinking, all primarily located up in Sunny Isles Beach area.
Right. So just pretend that it's not sinking. So it's amazing how this new construction is happening. And a lot of these Art Deco buildings or older, no Art Deco, but older buildings were acquired by different groups from different places, and they were fixed inside, got it, and they were resold as units one by one. So you see a lot of that as well. But I think it's still a lot of older product that gonna suffer with the situation and pricing, and the carrying cost is what is a problem. right now because it's super expensive. So carrying these properties are gonna, somebody's gonna say, I just cannot do it anymore. I need to sell. And once the sellout starts, that's when the opportunity is. And I'm sure these vultures are putting one feather by one feather in their closet, just to take a jacket and try to grab all these properties. This is for sure.
And another way to look at the 1% rule, remember I said 1.2 a door is what the units trade for during the winter, and 1.6 a door is what they want. So let's flip it. Let's say you're getting $2,700 a month in rent. That means the condos are worth 270 grand, and you're asking what I say 3,500. So the condos are asking 350, and they're worth 270, and somehow they're adding an extra $1 million on top of it. So I'm not going to say that's across the board. There are exceptions, but just something for people to kind of look at is what I would argue. And South Beach, Miami Beach, as strong as it is, it does go through cycles, and we talked about some of those cycles before we kind of got into these numbers.
Yes, I know. In that I agree, and it's because also, and that one that you're mentioning, the Ocean House, was prime real estate. Don't get me wrong; it was bulk, but it wasn't cheap.
Yep.
Even at bulk price, it was expensive, or pricey, just because it was in the sand. Imagine condos that the people that are coming from different, like I'm noticing, like all these new buildings that are happening in our beach. There are like 4 or 5 of them.
Yep.
Brand new. They're knocking down office space or retail that was there, and it's not even oceanfront. It's few blocks, 2 blocks or 3 blocks away from the beach, and they are not from here. They're not local developers. So
that's the Ellen Faina story. Remember Faina district, and now basically they dumped off part of the property, and now he's involved in trying to build a project on Miami River in downtown Miami. So remember, it's not about building the first one; it's about the second one. If you can stand the fight then another day, I would say that's something to sort of watch for. So, Jenny, the Miami New Times, the alternative newspaper down here, it's not what it used to be because newspapers aren't what they used to be. But every year they would come out with the best of New Times, best restaurant, best this, best that. Can you maybe share with anybody watching maybe some of your best ofs Miami Beach? It could be an experience, it could be a beach, it could be a restaurant. How about 2 or 3 best of Miami Beach? Maybe it's a place to park.
Well, I think there are restaurants like Mila and like restaurants in the Edition hotels. Like I don't remember the one in Faina House. I think it's a steakhouse that I went there and it was good. I think there's a lot of good restaurants, a lot of new chefs coming in town. South of Fifth, they have very good Italian restaurants, and it has everything. Now you have from the Cuban restaurants, and you have these like Fifi that it was like Venezuelan owned little places. There's a lot of different little places, little cafes I think that's what is attracting a lot of people from Europe into Miami Beach. You can sit and go to these cafes. That's the vibe that we don't have in the city. In the city is more fast pace, or there is a slower pace, and that's attractive for many. So there is a lot of places that are good there. For parking, if you ask for parking, I go to the public parking that is on 7th and Collins when I want to go to the beach. Yes.
There you go.
Or and you know where there is, if I say the secret now, everybody's
don't share the secret. Don't share the secret.
I cannot share the secret.
And I would say, for any suggestions, I would say, if you want to have reasonably priced Cuban food on the beach, Puerto Sagua.
Right. Puerto Sagua is still the same. I passed by the other day.
Little dumpy place. You get in there, they move it fast. It is what it is. They don't price gouge. They don't do any type of stuff. If you want to get a drink, you can always go to Club Deuce. Club Deuce, right across the street from there. If you're hungry afterwards, La Sandwicherie, which is a little carved out place where you actually sit on stools in the alley because they didn't have enough room, but it kind of takes you back to what South Beach was like. And then also too, I would suggest Ted's Hideaway for a drink. Ted's Hideaway is located south of Fifth. It's like a dingy dive bar that occasionally the likes of U2 and others go into this little place, little shithole place, and next thing you know, people will pop in. They'll do a set. They'll do that type of stuff. So these are some of the Miami Beach places I would suggest. There are others as you go north, but they can be a little sketchy.
Yes. Next time I make a list because I'm so bad with the names. But next time I'm gonna think of the names. Right now, you really caught me out of base.
All right. So one question I ask you at the end of every podcast is, what's your vibe right now? It could be on Miami Beach, could be on Miami, could be overall. Are you a bull with the horns going up? Are you a bear where the claws are coming down? Or are you on hold and sitting on the sidelines where you're a spectator? What's your vibe right now related to Miami condo market?
Actually, on Miami Beach, if you ask me, I would definitely consider to go to these little apartment, little condos that don't have parking or anything, and try to make offers that are lower than the asking price based on the stats that you provide today.
So you think there might be opportunity? I mean, you might not hit right away, but it might be time to start. Lack of a better word, you're not going to like it. Lowballing might be start submitting offers and see if anything hits.
I think
based on the numbers.
Based on the numbers and based on some listings that I saw, that I say, hey, this is not too bad for this price, And at the state of it's case by case. There are some opportunities, I think, there. Just because the price tag.
Yeah.
Because it's something that the people can afford. Remember, anything below $300,000 should be trading fast. But it's not happening. So maybe we go lower than that. Yeah.
That is Jenny Huerta. She's a broker owner of CVR Realty. You can find her at cvrrealty.com. She's a former financier. She's been a real estate broker and in the industry for north of 20 years. I'm Peter Zalewski. I'm the founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. I'm also a condo consultant. Also do tours. We're going to be doing walking tours, especially as we get closer to fall in South Beach area. So any kind of information you want related to condos, if you're a DIYer, you want to do it yourself, consider joining the club, Miami Condo Investing Club. You can check it out at miamicondo.club. We give you all the information. We do a monthly virtual meeting. We also do a monthly meetup. You're able to get together with some other club members and sort of talk shop. We also give you a list of preferred service providers or vendors in case you're kind of, you strictly want to do it yourself. Now, if you don't want to do it yourself, go out there and work with a realtor, work with a real estate agent. You can work with somebody like Jenny. You can work with anybody, but basically we're trying to share information with you. So this is Miami Condo Mondays. Every Monday at 4 p.m., we're going to talk straight about a particular area or a submarket or just a topic that's going on. So again, that's Jenny Huerta, CVR Realty. I'm Peter Zalewski, miamicondo.club. We will catch up with you next week. Ciao, ciao.
See you next week. Bye.